Okay.
That's absolutely classic. Are
Well,
we live now?
yes, we certainly
We
are.
are
Yeah,
live.
I'll do it now.
No, that's cool. While you do that, I'll introduce us. Hello, welcome. This is the Dyer's Cast. Oh my God, it's like looking into. Oh God,
A portal from beyond.
a portal from beyond. Goodness gracious me. I've actually got two topics for pre-show bants
Oh, excellent. Great.
today, Lloyd.
Always in need of bants.
One of them is just a general conversation that I was going to have with you anyway, and the other is my story about how I accidentally tripped a B-list celebrity the other day.
Very good.
So, as I was literally just telling Lloyd before we went live, I've started this new job in which I do a number of bits and pieces for the RSC, which is the Royal Shakespeare Company, near where I live. And I was sat at the stage door, and the stage door is this well, it's obviously the stage where a bit where like things go in and out for backstage, and it's where the actors. I'm not explaining to you; I'm explaining to other people.
I know what a stage door is.
Us thespies only understand the lingo. No, but I'm sat there, and it's quite a narrow. There's a narrow room going up to it. It's almost like a corridor, but it's a room, but it's very narrow. I'm sat there. I'm quite a tall guy. I've got my legs out, okay, and that sounds weird. I'm looking at my phone. Fuck's sake.
Got my legs out. Sun's out.
Just as you do. Yeah, obviously it is. Yeah, it's so sunny. But I'm sat there looking at my phone, oblivious, obviously, not looking at what's going on. Someone walks through. I'm not even looking at who it is, and I sense them, and I move my legs to obviously accommodate them walking past, but instead I'm too late, and my right leg hooks this individual's ankle, and he goes like tumbling. He doesn't fall,
Right.
but like he stumbles a few yards.
Yeah.
I look up. It's Reese Fans.
Oh wow.
I didn't know if you knew who he was or not. A lot of people probably won't. But Reese Fans,
he's great.
He is great. He's incredible.
Yeah.
He's a Welsh actor. He's largely known for being the friend in Notting Hill, alongside
he's in
Hugh
that
Grant.
Oasis video. He's great in that.
Yes, yes, he is. He's also a DJ in Kevin and Perry Go Large.
Yeah.
And he's also the lizard in Spider-Man.
That's right. He is the lizard.
Spider-Man film, yeah. But anyway, he stumbles, and I'm like, holy shit. First realize, oh no, I've not tripped someone over, but also, that's fucking Reese Fans.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, Mom, I'm so sorry. And he was just like, it's fine. I like to be kept on my toes, literally. And he made a joke out of it and then walked me, and I was like, oh, wow. That's
fair play to him.
Yeah, I was like, that's embarrassing also.
It would have been awful if he was like, how dare you? I'll have your head, like real
I bet some are, like, I reckon, who knows? But no, he seemed pretty down to earth, and nearly was down to earth, so thankfully not. Oh my goodness me, I'm on fire.
Yep.
So Lloyd, I'm getting Jedi Fallen Order when it comes out at the end of the week. Is it a game that's
It's interesting in my periphery. I haven't read anything about it, and I will wait for reviews before I get it.
That's probably wise.
Yes, I understand the urge to just get it, but I've been disappointed so many times by AAA
It's
games.
EA. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I catch myself thinking, Rob, why are you getting this on release? It's EA.
Yes.
Just wait. But all the trailers and all of the gameplay that I've seen look great, and I've been burned so many times. And we've discussed before that Star Wars, you said it last episode, Star Wars know how to make fucking good trailers.
Yeah, they do.
That inspire all kinds of feelings in you to like make you part with your money. But I want it, man. It looks really incredible.
It does look good, and I probably will get it, but I'm going to wait until I see reviews because
that's wise.
There's a big part of me thinks it, like, I've been burned so many times with AAA games, like getting excited about them, and then they come out and they're just like no good, So I'm just going to wait a little bit. Because like they have some incredible titles in the Star Wars games, but it's been a long time since they brought one out.
So long.
As in,
so long.
The more recent ones are garbage.
Absolute garbage.
Yeah.
In my attempt to, where I don't know if you get this, but like if I see a particular thing's coming out, like there's a new Star Wars coming out, I'll go back and I'll watch all Star Wars. If there's a new Star Wars game, I go back and I play a Star Wars game. I played 2 Star Wars games just for the hell of it. I reinstalled Jedi Outcast, which is incredible for its lightsaber combat.
Yeah.
Really, really good. Still fairly dated by today's standard, but still the actual system really still works and it's great.
Yeah.
Then I play it mistakenly. I just thought, you know what, I'm going to try this game again, and I put in The Force Unleashed.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know why I did that. Like, it has one good thing, which is the manipulation of the Force stuff.
Yeah.
But then everything else is just broken and rushed.
Yeah.
Like, you fall through floors and stuff. Like, there's like jittery animations. It's just no good.
It misses out on a lot, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be my concern with this one too, but we'll see.
That's the thing, and I'm thinking it can either go 2 ways. It'll either be like the Jedi Outcast, excellent, like for like one thing kind of game, or it's just going to be a plethora of meh, like Force Unleashed. Who knows? Yeah. Who knows? We'll be talking about Star Wars a little bit later on.
Yes.
But first of all, let's begin this episode of the Dyer's Cast by customarily saying, hello, Lloyd, how are you?
I'm quite well, thanks. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So, obviously, there's a number of big... Well, I say number, like the big news story is that Iskloft has arrived, Lloyd. Yes. You did it!
I know. Amazingly.
You did it!
It feels still kind of surreal. It's not fully finished, like there will be more, but it's out, people have it, and that's very nice. Kind of felt like it would never be done, but now it's done enough at the moment.
A giant undertaking for an individual. Like, it's insane.
Not wise, I'll tell you.
And it's massive as well. For those who didn't back it and didn't get it, like, I'm sure, Lloyd, it's available to buy now as well, right?
Yeah, it will be.
Not yet? It will be?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So coming soon, it's going to be available, so definitely check it out. But first time hearing about this, long story short, I stupidly ruined my account on Kickstarter by signing in on Facebook. If you were ever asked to sign in on Facebook, just don't do it. Because it meant that I couldn't access Iskloft for a few days. Okay. But now that I fixed that, I'm now getting all the emails I wasn't. And one of them, to me, said that there's going to be an app release.
So I have a friend who is an app designer for like airplane companies. What do you call them?
Oh, wow.
They're not called airplane companies.
No, they're not.
What are they called?
Airline company?
Airline, yeah. You know, those airplane companies. So he makes apps and stuff for them, and then I was like, can you make an app that will... Because it's, I mean, as an app goes, quite simple. Look what it does. Just roll some dice in the background. And yeah, so it'll be an app for the brutal wound system, because there's quite a lot of them, and I find sometimes when we play, it's like, there's a crit. Okay, great. Now roll me 6 dice and counter reference this with this, and carry the 1 and whatever. So it takes
absolutely, yeah. I see where you're coming from, but I mean, I quite like it because something awful has happened, and now you have to endure like the pain. You're like, oh my god, what's it gonna be? And then it's like, oh, you just got shot in the knee. Oh god, or oh, you just had your head caved in with a stone.
I think like one of the things like for me, I think it would be great, but I also can see that some people will want to roll the dice themselves because their fate depends on it. And so there are definitely people who are like dice superstitious and will want to roll that themselves. And that's fine, you can do that. But this thing, like you'll be able to input your location and any modifiers and stuff like that, and you'll hit the button and it'll just go, boom, here you go. Like description, in fact. So that's really handy, I think. It would be cool.
Very, absolutely. I think that's very handy. And I think the main joy of having the critical table is just to add in like it's always been like ever since like I think they were like in the previous editions of D&D and whatever, like the joy of it is like you throw an extra random element of chaos into the already existing randomness of combat, and I don't know, it just extends that a little bit, and I don't know, it's sort of like a little bit of a rush when you're like, holy shit,
what Kais has some good questions about it we can talk about in Kais's corner, but there is, I think, like it's worth talking about some of the stuff he's talking about in terms of like how badly an injury like that can affect the game.
That's a very good point. We'll get to that then for sure in Kai's corner coming up.
In terms of like the book itself, like it's done at this stage. I got some like incredible feedback from backers and stuff, so I'm adding that in while I wait for all the names to roll in, because I didn't get all the names, and so I'm waiting for that. And so when all those names are in and those edits are in, then there'll be like a revised version that everyone will get, all the backers and stuff, and then then I'll send. Then the printing starts. Send one off to a printer, and they print one, and then I look at it and I go, "Is this good?" And then I send it back to them, and I go, "Yes, this is fine," or "This is not fine. I need to change X, Y, Z." It's a whole thing, but it's getting there.
So I think because of the release of Iskloft, like there are a few things I wanted to ask you about it, because it's been obviously such a massive undertaking for you, and I like you say a lot. Like the one thing that you always say that I've noticed you say is that you've learned so much in doing it, like such a massive undertaking. My first question was a really good one, but I've just forgotten it. No, hang on, I will get it. Oh shit. Oh, this is what I was going to ask. So you obviously say that like it's a massive undertaking, things like that, and it was your decision a long time ago that you wanted some kind of supplement made of Iskloft because it's your primary setting and it's the setting that you enjoy the most. And there's also a question about why do you enjoy this setting the most later on, which we'll also cover. And in view of the fact that you're a man who likes to make settings, what do you think is the point where you decide, oh, I've made a new setting, like you've made one quite recently, I want that to now be a supplement? When does that happen? When does that decision take place?
Right. It took a long time for me to consider Iskloft like bookable. You know what I mean? Like I probably won't do another. I can't see Hrask, which is what I'm working on at the moment, but that's just for fun, becoming like a published thing. I think that's just really just going to run games in it and stuff. Like for me, this one is like Iskloft is pretty unique in terms of like I don't see a lot of other settings like it out there. And I've just like I had so much of it in my head, and there was also like mechanics and stuff like that already, and so I think like a lot of that stuff. Yeah,
but so it's because there was already basically a book of it in your brain already, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's it's different. It's quite different to other settings. Like I feel like if I put out my fantasy setting, there are also 40 other fantasy settings. You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know what makes mine so like it would be unique, but I don't see what makes it so unique that it needs to be published. But with Iskloft, like I don't see many settings like it.
Yeah,
know? And so I figured like this will do. It'll be a thing.
Oh, absolutely right. And I think obviously that helps for business as well. If there aren't many things like it, that's another thing. It makes it a viable product to put the effort in the first place, I imagine.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, that's a fair point. Do you feel different from running a game of Iskloft to any other now? Because you are now technically a professional Iskloft player.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
No, you actually are though. Like you are a professional Iskloft person.
Yeah, maybe the only professional Iskloft person.
I think. Well, yeah. I guess technically you are. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean I still love playing in it. Like I play Nico's game that's on. I'm playing 2 of Nico's games that I run.
Yes.
Pretty frequently, and like I love playing in it. And I haven't run it in a while, but I will be running it again, and I'm going to run the starter adventure that's in the book, and hopefully a different campaign as well. But it doesn't feel any different. Like it feels different in that like now I can look in the book as
in
opposed
a published book to play it,
as opposed to have to reference my brain, you know. So that's nice. And like now when people play it, I can be like, well, you can look it up in this book, you know, as opposed to here are 16, you know, random Google documents that all contradict each other, you know, like. So it's sort of like nice in that sense that like now it feels like a real thing, or a more real thing, I guess, you know.
Okay, I'm going to ask this. This will be my last question. Well, we're going to talk about Iskloft again later on, but for now, at least, with this edition of Iskloft, if this book is Iskloft that you've released, obviously it is. Sorry, let me rephrase that. I put this the wrong way. If the book you've just released, Iskloft, is your Lord of the Rings, what would the Iskloft Silmarillion be?
That's a good question. A difficult one.
Sorry.
I think it would have to be something more mythological, more magic-y. So like more, you know, like there'd be giants and gods and people with thunder magic and it would be
like it would be the great poems, the Eddas.
Yes.
It would be more.
I think so. Because I feel like that's the implication in like. It would either be that, like that it's more sort of saga-y and more like heroic, and there are like great heroes and they talk to gods and stuff like that, or it would be like we go back and it's like the Bronze Age and it's like Germanic tribes instead of
like a historical thing as well. Like there's a change in. Yeah, I guess there would be. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so it would be one of those two things, I guess. I'm not sure which would be more interesting.
I would like to see a Silmarillion of Iskloft.
Someday, perhaps.
Someday.
Yep.
In the far future, maybe.
Yes.
Give yourself a bit of a rest, first of all.
Yep.
Is there anything else you wanted to address about Iskloft whilst we're on the topic? Anything going on? Anything to look out for?
Oh yeah, I'm writing adventures that backers will get as well. On top of and these are just going to be free for backers so that they can feel better about having to wait for so long.
Well worth it though. Like
yes,
it's 100% the case. It is 100% better to receive something that's finished and well executed than rushed to a deadline. That's the whole point of Kickstarter.
That's why it took so long. It's because I didn't want to release something that's like not great, you know.
For sure. Yeah.
But yeah, there'll be extra adventures and stuff, and then I probably will be doing more content stuff for it here and there, and then hopefully consistently. But for now, I'm just going to get all this stuff out, and then I'm going to breathe for a while.
Yes,
you know,
breathing is definitely required. Play some games, play some fucking games.
Yeah.
Speaking of playing games, I had the good fortune of playing in a D6 Star Wars game run by Matt Click. The game was called Reclamation, a story about four Force-attuned individuals being captured by the Inquisitorius, the Inquisitor Force of Star Wars, and banding together, they had to, join forces to escape the ship.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a cracking game, and I would recommend if you're interested in that kind of thing, definitely go watch it. I won't go into the full story because I think people should definitely check it out for not only the cool GMing of Matt Click. We all know he's an excellent and very cinematic and great storytelling games master, but I want to talk about the system that game uses, D6, which is his hack of the West End games Star Wars. Now, I didn't ever play West End games. I had read the books, but I'd never been involved in the game. But I love that system. I understand you've played it as well, right, Lloyd?
Yeah, we started. Matt ran a little trilogy for us, and we started with the normal Star Wars D6, and then we used a very early version of Hyperspace. For the second and third game, and it was a big improvement. Like the actual one is very clunky, and there's a lot of rolling in combat, like a huge amount of rolling in combat in the old, where it's like you roll to hit, then you roll to dodge, and then if you get hit, you roll for damage, and then you roll for soak, and like all this sort of stuff, and it's like it takes forever to do anything. And so he's just like simplified a lot of that stuff, which I think is great. I really liked it, although I haven't played a Jedi in it.
Well, that's the thing, really, and I think Barker actually said it on the stream. It's really, it's been 20 years in the arrival, really, that there's a Star Wars system where the Force really works in it, and it wasn't apparent to me. It was kind of when I looked at the rules and was making a character and stuff, but until you actually sit down and play it, and see it happen in front of your eyes, it's hard to tell. But the Force in it was great because it's kind of hand wavy, and not in a derogatory sense at all, like a perfect sense.
It has to be, I think, for it, because I remember when he was doing the Force, just you can have the Force skill, and then there's 3 subcategories or whatever, and that is so much better. Because I love Final Fantasy Flight Star Wars, which is great. I think I love it, but it does the Force very badly. I think the Force aspect of that game is really poor in that you can be quite good at one Force skill, but then you are not good at any of the other ones, and that's not how Jedi work. They can do everything, they're really good at all the Force things, all the ones you see in the show or in the movies or anything, are all, they can do all the basic Force stuff, and many of them have powers beyond that. And so I mean, we found it when we played what was that game called? Insurrection, where like you were all Jedi. And,
I got immediately shot in the chest.
Right, and it's like there's a bunch of stuff like that like feels
that's true.
A bit weird, and like you're so you were good at lightsabers, but like you then weren't good at the Force, and like those things don't get, like you're good at all of it, I think. And so this one seemingly does a really good job of like allowing you to sort of make the Force do what you want it to do,
That's it. I said on the stream, I said if you know Star Wars, then you personally know the limitations of what you can and can't do with the Force. And against the pose checks from the NPCs that you're using the Force on or with, like that's how it's determined, and it is that simple, and it's that easy. There was an excellent moment where, imprisoned in a cell, the 4 Jedi, under circumstances because of another Force user, one of the Inquisitors on the Purge, the ship they've been taken to, has an ability to dampen the Force, which is a theme that is explored sometimes, not often, in Star Wars, and I really like that because I thought,
it's in Thrawn,
Yes. Yeah.
What are they called?
Yes, calamari.
Yes.
Those things, those weird lizard things that cancel the Force for some reason. Sure. But it's just a cool idea. Oh no, the Force is being dampened, and it's the perfect weapon for the Empire to use against taking down whatever Jedi remain in the galaxy. So the 4 of us had to sort of, we use the Force first of all to bridge our minds, so we could talk to each other silently, so the stormtroopers guarding us wouldn't hear us. And from there, we're able to sort of like formulate a brief plan and decide that we were going to mind trick the guy watching us. And there's a kind of help action function that I think Matt had put into place in the game. I don't know if it existed in West End before. Could be wrong. But in which you can help, and by doing so, you add an extra die to your die pool, which is so good with the Force because it turned that into a mind trick encounter where each of us took a turn to make a check and say what we were telling this stormtrooper to do. So Jace, my character, said lower your weapon. Barker's character says, I think actually you want to remove both of your weapons, and then he took out like a pistol that he had hidden around his back. It was so cool. And then each one of us had a suggestion for him to do until eventually we made him walk out of the cell. But just that alone, that very, very simple mechanic, made the Force so accessible. That's why I wanted to talk about it.
That's great.
I just thought it was excellent.
I was going to run I never got around to it, but run a all Jedi game as well, because I really like because I don't think, and we'll talk about this later because Jeff was asking about it, but I don't think you can mix Jedi and non-Jedi characters, Force users, because it's like, to me, it's like putting superheroes in a squad of normal soldiers. It's like not the same thing. I don't think, it doesn't make sense to me when mechanically, like it makes sense narratively, but mechanically it doesn't. And so, like,
I disagree because I have a very certain way to deal with that it's kind of, I'll just say it. So like in the past, whenever I've run Star Wars games that have Jedi characters and non-Jedi characters, I do that thing that I did with the first session, which I would like to go back to and maybe use this system to use actually. But I have always put the cross cut into when I do Star Wars battles. So when you roll for combat, like something's happening with a Jedi, and then somewhere else something's happening with the people on the ground or whatever, and then people up in space or whatever.
But it also relies on there always being something else for the people to do. Like if you just have a combat encounter, then the Jedi just goes over and cuts them in half. And that's the end. And like I think that's fine. Like Jedi should be more powerful because they're superheroes. But for me, like mixing them either makes the Jedi feel weak or makes the other people feel super weak. Like if the Jedi has to come down to the level of the normal person, then they're not Jedi anymore. And if they're not on the level of the other person, then the other people are just going, I'll just sit here and sip my tea while the Jedi does all the work, I think.
I think you're absolutely right, but that is inherent in the actual setting, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's totally
part of Star Wars is the Jedi are not normal people. But then if you want to run a game where you have to have like mechanical parity, where everyone is sort of a similar power level, you just can't have Jedi and normal people. I don't think, it doesn't really work.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I still want to use that system to complete the Knights of the Remnant game at some point.
Yeah.
But that'll be a topic for another time. Right. Our next topic, if I recall, that's right. We were talking about it just earlier. Lloyd has created, or is in the midst of creating, a brand new setting. So with this, first of all, for those of you that don't know, I think, Lloyd, you should give like a pitch, but just tell us what it's about.
I don't really know.
That's fair. That's fair. Like, it's a strange one, but I love it.
Yeah, I've kind of like been running Iskloft and Westeros and low fantasy games for years, and haven't really run anything high fantasy for a long time, if ever. And I just have been like craving that. Maybe it's because I've been working on Iskloft so much recently, and I got a little taste of it in playing Jeff's Embers a Light game, where I got to play a level 10 wizard, and felt like a god. And though I think like there's cool stuff you can do with fantasy that like I have never really, or haven't done since I became good at GMing, if that makes sense. Because I did like when I was a kid, or like when we played very first time I played D&D and stuff, but I haven't played like normal fantasy with people who are excellent players, ever. And so I think I'm just like interested in it at the moment. And so then I like sat down and was like, okay, if I'm going to run fantasy, then I want to make some stuff that's interesting. And then I thought like, okay, what races will I include? And I wanted to include all the classics. So I've got humans, and I've got dwarves and elves. And then I was like, let's just throw some weird shit in here. So then I have tieflings, which to me are still a weird race. I know they're normal in 5th edition, but like,
they're still weird to me.
They seem.
Yeah.
I always think of them as plane touched as opposed to a normal race, because I think they were plane touched in 3.5 or whatever.
That's right.
So I never really think of them as just being like every day walking around towns and stuff, because they're demons. Like, they look like demons. Like,
right, exactly. Yeah.
Red skin and horns, and like people are not going to just be like, oh, there's a,
I find their presence and the Dragonborn to be diminishing to their parent monsters, essentially. Yeah. Like I like, if you see a guy walking around with a dragon head all the time, it's like you might as well just have dragons flying around in the sky all the time. You might as well have demons walking around everywhere. Like, it takes away personally the mystique of it all. You know, I don't know.
So I have dwarves, and I did some stuff with dwarves about like that they're not really like material creatures the way that humans are. They're like kind of stone based, and they don't really have genders, and they're like weird little elementals, sort of. I
thought I really really like that, because I think your inspiration for the elves I think comes from conversations we've had on the Dyer's cast before. Like, I noticed that there was a point you made that I've never forgotten, which was, if you were an elf who's immortal, like the Lord of the Rings elves or whatever, you would spend 100 years of your life just dedicating yourself to learning how to be good with a sword, another 100 to be... So, like, those paths that the elves have, where they have to dedicate themselves to a number of them to gain station or whatever, I thought was excellent. I thought that was really cool.
It makes sense to me, like, and if you were elves and you lived forever, like, that you would also sort of, if you live for 5,000 years, and then someone who's 150 years old goes, I would like to be the next, whatever, president of elfdom. Like, no fucking way, you're a child. You're a baby. Like, and so that kind of stuff. So you have to, like, go through all these paths and learn all this stuff before you're considered, like, a proper adult or grown up,
But the reason I mentioned the elves first is because I think the elves, this is going to sound dismissive, it's not. I think a lot of people like to twist what elves are into different things, and a lot of the time it's really effective. I like when in other games that you've done, like where elves have been actually like the terrifying, like it is, they're awful, just awful. But they're often twisted, and because of that, they're often portrayed in games. I think dwarves usually, in most things, are basically always the same.
They're Tolkien dwarves everywhere. They're all, and that's because they're great. Like, I think dwarves are.
They are
great.
Yeah, they're great.
But I just figured, like, I don't know, mess it up a little bit and see what happens.
I really liked that. I liked what you did with them. Yeah.
And so then there's also tieflings who, like, so aliens landed on this planet of Frask, right? The Gith crash landed. There was an astral storm, and a ship of Githyanki crashed, and with their like psionic powers, raised up a bunch of races and built a load of cities and whatever else. And they're all gone now, all dead, because they age in the prime material and they don't age in the astral, and they didn't know what to do with that because they couldn't get home. But they left this legacy of like all these things that they made, and one of them is this tiefling race who were like bred to be a perfect soldier legion thing, and then we lived for like 15 years. Because I was thinking, like, if I was making a perfect race of slave soldiers, what are the qualities that I would want? Grow immediately, perfect obedience, you know, stuff like that. And so if they only live for 15 years, they don't have time to go, hey, what are we slaves? Like, what's, you know, like, they don't have time to develop those kind of thoughts. So I was like, okay, they only live for a very short time and whatever. But now that the Gith are gone and they've like rebelled, they're free, and they go, we don't have a culture, we don't have anything, we're just, you know. So that's that.
I think as well, which I think is really beautiful about it, and I'm sure this came into your consideration at some point, could be wrong, but what I take away from that is now that obviously they're this race that do only exist for 15 years, but their masters are now gone. They are these creatures that only live for a certain time, and thus probably have to live life to the full.
Yeah.
Like live life very intensely and very passionately and very driven, because they have to. They have no other choice. Their species won't do anything if they, you know, only last that long. So, perhaps that's where the you know, you have the usual lore and stuff for like devil touch people to be like, you know, all about sin and like an indulgence and things like that. Obviously, they're going to be like that because they only get 15 years to do it. So I think that's a beautiful way how that interpretation could exist in that world.
Yeah, I think they might, some of them will get really into sensation and like exploring everything and like trying everything and that kind of thing. I think others will be working on a cure to stop them dying, you know, like, because I don't know if they can, I haven't even considered, like, can they breed? Like, would you want your soldiers to be able to breed? Probably, I don't know. If
that's a really good point.
Or are they grown in vats? Like, I don't really know. So I have to think about that. And the ones that I haven't done yet are Saurians, who are like all the lizard people. So I'm going to have, weirdly for me,
lizard folk.
Yes, I'm going to have kobolds and lizard folk and Yuan-Ti, I think, are the ones that will go in. Maybe Dragonborn. I don't know how I feel about Dragonborn, but definitely like these three sort of like races that work together and live together and are a culture together. I haven't really written the
as
thing.
Playable?
Yes. Yep.
Cool.
And then the last playable thing will be goblins. So
I noticed, I really like that they're sort of like, because, and this will lead us on to the next point that I wanted to talk to you about this setting. They each take inspiration from different cultures of antiquity.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that the goblinoids, hobgoblins, are more based off Rome and things like that.
Yeah, so it'll be goblins and orcs and ogres. All this, like, also this, who are ostensibly the same race. You know the way there's goblins and hobgoblins and bugbears who are all goblins? I was like, I don't really like bugbears or hobgoblins, so I'm just going to like take the ones I do like that are vaguely, you know, generic.
Do you not like hobgoblins?
They're fine.
I quite like them.
Yeah. They just don't have much character, I don't think. Well, I've never really seen them in much stuff. And so, yeah, so like they will... Rome makes sense to me for them. I didn't want them to be like savage. I think that's like easy. You know? Like often like orcs are like this trope of like Warcraft orcs, where they're like the noble savage sort of, you know, sort of thing. And like, that's fine, but Warcraft has done that and I don't really want that. So I would like them to play against type a little bit and maybe not be like, oh, we smash, you know?
I think it's interesting. The reason I thought you'd pick that was because my experience of the hobgoblins at least are like they're more militarized. They're like a militarized like, but yeah, I see what you mean. I really like the idea of that portrayal. To be fair, that sounds really cool.
Yeah, I'd like them to be like mercantile and like, yeah, civilized, good builders and stuff like that. You know,
fast growers as well.
Yeah.
Like Rome's the speed at which they could like
expand.
just move and build exactly like and expand. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that's in terms of the player races, that's it. And then it's sort of the other thing that I considered was like, okay, most settings that I play are set in a vague Middle Ages. So like Lord of the Rings is set in the Middle Ages.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, and so is Faerun, and so is most sort of settings that you play that are fantasy tend to be like set in a sort of vaguely medieval setting. I was like, like the cultures in the ancient times are so distinct and so noticeably different, and so like they look different in every way. Like their architecture is different, their like soldiers all look different and stuff like that. So I figured like I could lean into that and do something with it. So I think that'll be sort of, for me, running it more interesting than you know, everyone, there's lords and dukes and knights and, you know, peasants, and that's fine, but it's also kind of everywhere. So I was like, I'll make it a bit weird. And
agreed. Yes. One you didn't mention was human. They appear to be a nomadic people.
Yeah, I wanted them to be a bit wild or undeveloped or something compared to some of the more ancient races. Because humans are always just like the generic, we do everything, we're everywhere, we're traders, you know, all the cities are human, and I didn't want that, because if elves have been around for so long, and then these like Saurian like lizard folk have been around forever, and it's like, well, they would have cities, and humans would be, you know, I think relatively recently uplifted in terms of like when they like they probably have bronze weapons and things, and so like, and also because I've been playing Horde Lands, like that tribal sort of steppe culture is really interesting to me, and I think it might be something fun, you know, and unusual.
Definitely. I think the strong point with like things like Lord of the Rings, or maybe not Lord of the Rings, because humans are still fairly well developed, but Mass Effect was the main example I was thinking of. I really like in Mass Effect, when you first get introduced to the Citadel races, it's made abundantly clear that humans are not top dog by like a long stretch. They're like quite near the bottom in terms of the pecking order, which is really refreshing. It is very refreshing, and
I don't want the always play human, to be human, you know.
Yeah,
because for me it is the thing. When I play.
Same.
Know? And so I wanted like to make a setting where like I look at it and I go, I'll be something else, you know, because I want like Jeff not to play a human, and I want you not to play a human, and Nico not to play.
Definitely,
a human.
I won't play a human. I promise I won't play a human.
It's, I think, often very hard, because for me, like that's my default position, and so I just figured like it might be. I wanted to make.
It doesn't help that mechanically, personally, I find human to be the superior. Like mechanically speaking,
I had a little bit of thought about that, and I think what I'll do is all races will get +2, +1 in whatever they want.
Yeah, that's good call. Good call.
And then the other things you get from your race will be whatever, dark vision and shit like that, maybe. But I want to keep that to a minimum, and then probably you'll get more stuff from your background or culture or something like that. Because I think like that whole race determination thing makes me feel a bit gross when I think about it.
I agree.
Like all dwarves are this, all humans are this, you know. Like I don't know about that. I think your growing up circumstances determine more of that, you know.
Absolutely, 100%. And there's something I want to ask you about it as well, actually, because we're talking about obviously what races to pick and things like that. Do you sort of see? I imagine you do. Do you sort of see what kind of games you want to run in this setting? Like, does it have a? Do you reckon there's a certain type of game that would operate well in it?
Yeah, so it'll be more heroic. It's fantasy, and you can be a wizard or a cleric, and you can bring back the dead, and you can throw fireballs. So, I think just based on the fact that all the classes will be available, has to be more heroic. And so I think like monster hunting is a big thing, and then like I want to try and not do what I always do, which is like you're in the middle of nowhere, build an empire, which I love. That's my favorite game.
Yeah, we all do though. That's the thing. Like you can't like we play what we like. That's all right.
But I wanted to try and not do that for once, you know.
Sure.
And
sure.
Yeah, run sort of maybe a more traditional adventure. See, the thing about it is, I don't like running traditional adventures. I like it when the players do all that stuff themselves and determine what they want to do. So there must be a middle ground that I will apparently discover through this, maybe, you know?
Well, I think I think it's always nice to have an element of like you're building something like with sandbox things like go-to thing, and I quite like doing, I guess, is like, yeah, you're going on an adventure, but there's something you can develop on the way. So say like if you're a mercenary
Yeah.
company,
Yes.
you can start devoting your resources to the base you operate from or something. So
Right.
you still feel like you have something that you're kind of building up as you decide which adventures you go on and things like
Yeah,
that.
I think something like that would work great. And I really love the crew mechanics from Blades in the Dark, which are great. And I like the,
Oh yeah.
what's the one called?
Spire?
Spire is great. No, I'm thinking there's like a hack for Blades in the Dark, which is about a mercenary company.
Isn't it based off that book series?
Band of Blades, I think it's called.
Oh, okay, then no. I'm thinking of something Watch.
Oh, that's a different one. Yeah, there is one called The Watch. But yeah, so something like that maybe, where you have like a mechanical thing that you can improve. Like you have a clan or a tribe or something, you know?
It's funny actually, because I only bring that up because I'm currently playing. I get to actually play in a home game, which I'm very happy about, because I'm usually the one that has to run it. I'm playing in a home game where essentially we are like a little mercenary company that have been employed by the ruling class to sort of help. Our remit is like go and like help where there is trouble, because civilization is rebuilding essentially after a great catastrophe. So we are kind of given free reign to sort of do what we want and decide what missions we go on, but we're still like part of something that we can upgrade essentially and spend gold on and shit.
Yeah, that's cool.
So that's a really nice playing dynamic that I've been enjoying lately. So yeah, cool. Should we get some questions? Because I think all the questions we've had nicely fit into the topics that we've just covered.
Yes, there were some in the chat. We might just grab those first.
Oh, the YouTube? Yes, please do. I haven't actually brought that up yet. If you've got the first one, that would be great.
Does it bother Rob that I've wholesale thieved his idea of the telling from his Lorekeepers games for my own homebrew world?
Does it bother me? Absolutely. You owe me 10%. No, not at all. I mean, the idea of the telling is essentially like it's just a different dimension that echoes with deeds of stories and things like that. But that's, it's not necessarily like a brand new idea. Like that's existed in mythology for a long time. And if you've been inspired by the Lorekeepers game to put something from it in your game, then it's nothing but flattery. Imitation is the greatest form of flattery. So no, that doesn't annoy me at all. That's great, and I'm glad that you watched.
Very good. Somebody asked about my fantasy setting, and will I live stream it? I just talked about it, and yes, I probably will. And Kai has asked, do you need parity in a party?
Do we need what, sorry?
Parity in a party, like that the characters have the same sort of...
Oh, I see, yes.
Power level? I think you do. I guess unless it's the design of the game that you're not equally capable, but I think if you're playing D&D, you do, because the combat is based upon everyone being roughly of the same strength, and if that's not the case, then it will become like incredibly difficult for some, and then like tediously miserable for others. And so I think you kind of need, in D&D at least, some sort of like closeness in terms of how powerful you are.
Yeah, because the thing is, we often talk about the spotlight, in which obviously people get sort of like an even shot at the spotlight when it comes to the role playing or interacting with different NPCs and things like that. I think the same can be said of like when you're in it, because a lot of D&D, if we're talking about the standard D&D, is combat. It's a very combat heavy game, and a lot of games that, I mean, not necessarily ours, but like there's a lot of games out there where absolutely. You want to be all on a certain even playing field, because there's nothing worse than having gone into like 3 encounters in a row and nothing that you've done has had any effect whatsoever. you start throwing questions. Why am I here?
Right,
You have like your character can have like an existential crisis. Like, what do I bring to this dynamic? You know?
Yeah.
No, I think it's completely valid. I don't mind per se with things like we were talking about with Star Wars. I think it's like I liked. You know what? One thing that I thought was really cool when we played it against the Shadow, and it was the first time I actually met Taylor. It was when she came in as her elven warrior, and like just decimated like people in front of us. Like obviously we weren't balanced, but to the fact that there was this elven warrior helping us, like it, I don't know, it just lent something to it. So I think it is a good tool to use sometimes, perhaps.
It was part of the game of Against Shadow. You couldn't play elves.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
For the purpose that when you met elves, that you would be like, wow, because that's what they should be. I always think because Legolas is like, you look at the story or like you watch the movie, they're like Legolas is so much more powerful than everybody else in that party. You know, like in terms of his combat ability, and so I think that's interesting. And I don't think like we did it with Jeff's game. Like I was level 10, and I think then Quo was level 8 or something like that. But it wasn't like such a huge gap. I think if it's the design of the game that you are not equal power levels, it could be fun. But I think if it's not the design of the game, and you're just the game has to be built around it. I think in order for it to work and be fun as opposed to miserable.
Agreed. I'm just seeing if we have any other questions in the chat. Let's see. We have one by Marquise. That's the only one I see a question next to. Are you going to be using mind flayers and all that stuff from D&D canon or nah, Lloyd?
I will be, yeah. I'm going to use...
You can't resist mind flayers, can you? You've got to use them. You have to use them.
Never used loads of the cool monsters, like the classic monsters. Like, I don't think I've ever really done a proper D&D dragon or a mind flayer or a beholder or like a bunch of like really classic monsters. They probably won't be exactly as they are. I'll like change them to fit the world and maybe change a little bunch of stuff about them, but I will hopefully get to use a bunch of those monsters which I never really got to use before. I think that would be fun.
Definitely, yeah. I'm really excited to see what dragons and mind flayers look like in Hrask as well.
I'm thinking that all dragons are dwarves. Like that dragons only exist when a dwarf gets dragon sickness.
So the dragon sickness.
So it's like a plague, and they like become. Because I talked a little bit in the thread with Jeff and Connor about like they eat certain minerals or whatever, and then if you like they become too greedy and they hoard them too much and they like eat them too much, they will become that metallic dragon sort of,
For sure, and it taps into sort of like their background of being connected with the elements and things like that, and from that they can become something greater but far terrible. Like it's, I think that's some really interesting stuff can come from there, and you can just see the pages of lore of the dwarves that fell into dragon kind. I love it. That's really, really cool. Do we have any other questions in the
not in the chat
YouTube?
right now? No.
Okay, well, if there aren't going to be any more, feel free to pop them into the YouTube chat, and please put question on the front of it so we can identify it as such. Now, over on the Absolute Tabletop Facebook group, this is where we post before we go live with the Dice Cast. We try and do that as early as possible. Our first question is from the Doty himself, Jeff Doty. He says, what is your favorite thing about low magic settings you can't get in a high magic setting? And there are other questions he asked, but that's that for now.
So, my favorite thing that you can't get in a high magic setting is reality. Like, it feels real in a low magic setting in a way that it just by design cannot feel in a high magic setting. By real, I mean like close to our world. Like, you can have a sense of realness in a high fantasy setting, but my fear of death is so much higher when I play Iskloft or Westeros than it is when I ever play any high fantasy game. And it's because you have like magical healing and resurrection, and there's magic, and so like I'm not afraid to die in those settings often, and the other thing that you get from a low fantasy setting is a reliable understanding of what is possible.
Yep.
So
that's very good, yeah.
When we're empire building in Westeros, I know what can happen. I know that the capabilities that I have are roughly equal to the capabilities that my enemies have. whatever. They might have more soldiers or less soldiers or whatever, but like it boils down to, you know, like, or in Iskloft, like it boils down to we have this many boys, they have this many boys. That's most of the equation is there, you know.
Yeah.
And in a high fantasy setting, that's just not the case, where you can have people who can, like what we always say, like stop time or launch a meteor or whatever it is, you know, like you can't rely upon our world's strategies. Like, if I am playing in a high fantasy setting and I'm like, okay, what we'll do is we'll see this choke point and we'll put our boys there and we'll put all our shields together, we'll all take the dodge action. Okay, great, we've just piled up for a wizard to kill us, you know. And so tactics that work in our world don't work in a high fantasy world at all. So those are the things that I think you can't really get from high fantasy.
I think my sort of, and it's a point I always make, so apologies for those repeat viewers, I'm going to say it again. The term is low magic. It doesn't mean no magic. Yeah. So low magic does introduce this wonderful thing that is used by Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. It's present in Iskloft. It's present in Lawkeepers. It's the fact that because it does exist, and even Game of Thrones and things like that, it exists, but it's just so rare that it retains the wonder. It retains the mystery behind it. You know, like that is just key to all of those franchises and all of those settings that we play in games, you know, because it's that. Now, obviously, funnily enough, every time those games are played, there's some kind of encounter. Maybe not on Iskloft and things like that, but like, or Game of Thrones, but, you know, we're playing Jedi in the Star Wars game, for instance, you know, like, obviously, you know, it's there. Everyone knows it's actually there, but it's a buy-in. So that's something that you get because it's just a neat little thing to feel like it's a lived-in world, and it's got history, I guess. Mm-hmm. Jeff continues with his questions, but I've just closed it. Do you have it in front of you? I don't know why I did that.
Yes, I do. What's your favorite thing about high magic settings that you can't get in a low magic setting?
That's interesting. That is interesting. Do you have an answer for this?
Yeah, heroes who can fight a horde and win. Mm-hmm. Heroes who can fight a god and win. Stakes that involve the entire world. You know, the ability of like 4 characters to fight dozens, hundreds of enemies and come out on top.
I think an interest. Oh, sorry.
And sorry, this other thing is like extra dimensional or extra planar, or, you know, creatures from other dimensions or other whatever monsters.
Yeah, that's it's a really good point. In fact, the home game that I'm talking about, it goes back to the old setting that I used to play with my friends. Whatever, the last conflict was the Planar Wars, which I just think is so cool, like a war between dimensions. Like, man. I think it's sort of linked to what you were saying before, like in terms of like in a low magic setting, you know, you can only use tactics that dwell in reality. Well, obviously by playing high magic games, you get to think outside the box in a different way, I suppose. Not that you can't think outside the box in low magic, but you know, you have all of these tools
you can't do.
Yeah, exactly, right. But that just goes into what you were saying really about having all of these abilities, all these powers. So
like in Jeff's game where I played that wizard, like we got to this ruined castle, and I was like, in a week, with the spells I have, I could make this not a ruined castle. I could stone shift and fabricate, or whatever it is, until this was now a fully functional castle on my own. You know, like, and so like that to me, which in Iskloft would take years, centuries. You know, like a wizard can do in a week on his own. You know, and so like that sort of stuff, just like fires it into a different dimension. You know.
But the beauty also, like, it wasn't in the last game that we played of Old Ways, the Game of Thrones game that Lloyd runs. It was the one before. We were talking about hosting this big wedding that was going to be happening in our family's keep, and like a few comments have been made by other visiting NPCs. Oh, like, you know, your hall's a bit small and things like that. Like, and it made us all feel a little bit shit. But also, as players, all of us are thinking the same thing. It doesn't matter what we say. Oh, we want to improve that. We want to rebuild. We want to make it grow. We want more space. In our lifetimes, in the setting, that just isn't possible whatsoever. Like King's Landing took like hundreds of years to be built. Like Aegon the Conqueror said, like, this is what it's going to be, and then it took like years for it to become what it is when you reach like the TV show or whatever. So or the book series. So, but I think that's also quite cool because like it's a game of limitations, isn't it?
Yes.
So
and so like you can also like, in Westeros you can see whatever King's Landing or like Old Town or these like massive castles, but they were built in like the Age of Heroes and no one really knows how they did it. It's sort of magic, and no one can do that now. And so like, you look like if you were going to build a castle, your great grandkids might inherit that castle, but it might even be their grandkids by the time that's done. And so like, there's a real sort of sense of scale that maybe doesn't exist in the same way in a high fantasy game. When like a team of wizards could build a castle in a week,
Yes, I love that though. It's very cool at the same time. Jeff concludes his wonderful questions by saying, in Hyperspace D6, Jedi characters are pretty much ballers right from the character creation, skipping any semblance of being a beginner or lacking in abilities. Is it possible to build a system that does Jedi well but also lets them start off weak? Is balancing Jedi to be anything less than amazing even a good goal to begin with? Or is it best just to let them do all their badass Jedi things from the get-go?
We should talk about it a little bit, but I would say that if you want to play a Jedi, you want to play a capable Jedi of at least Jedi Knight level most of the time. And if you're doing that, then just start powerful and play a game that's for Jedi. Yeah. If you want to play a Padawan game, like, maybe don't.
I think it's I had an answer for this, but I forgot it. That's happening a lot today. Let me see. Let me just read it again. I think there's... Because even the Jedi Padawan, like with Star Wars, I like playing Star Wars games when they're... This is what I meant to say. I got there in the end. At the moment, we're playing a Star Wars trilogy of games. And I personally think for Jedi, I think shorter games you're probably going to benefit, I think, because... not necessarily saying you have to stick to the trilogy, but like Luke at the beginning of Empire Strikes Back or whatever, he's able to like pull his lightsaber to him and stuff like that. He can do flips and stuff, and he's just learned that on his own, okay? And in that story, he has the capability that he needs throughout the story. Obviously, he loses to Vader, but again, that's in service to it. Like, so I think if you decide roughly what they're going to be up against in this campaign that you're coming up with, then you can decide, well, they can be at a certain level where they still need... Like, I think the setting of the, like, post-Order 66, where the Jedi are being hunted, I've never played in that, and that's another thing that I've been really enjoying. And again, another reason why I'm looking forward to this game that's coming out, the Fallen Order game, because I like the concept of the Jedi being hunted down and stuff. I
think that's another way that you can kind of mitigate a Jedi's power as well.
It's the world around them, yeah.
Because like maybe an individual can't stand up to a Jedi, but if you use your Force powers on a planet and someone sees you and rats you out to the Empire, and then you have to do what you're doing on the planet, and the time you're getting down to your ship, there's a and like a Star Destroyer warps in above you, then it's like, okay, yes. And so you can kind of keep people from using their powers all the time by like making it clear that if they do, someone will report them, because most people just want to look out for themselves,
Yeah, and I have no doubt that while we did well, like in the session that we just played, while we did well, we were fighting stormtroopers in a hangar and stuff, but I still felt that if more stormtroopers arrived, there was a very real threat. Even though there was four of us with different attunements to the Force, it still felt like we're still on a ship filled with people that want to kill us. And wherever we escape to might be filled with people who want to kill us. Right. So, again, it was like, if you go back to my point of if you know Star Wars, then you can play Star Wars, weirdly, because...
Yeah, it does require some sort of understanding of the setting, and also requires players not to milk it too much, I think.
Yes, and I think that can be a problem, weirdly, particularly with Star Wars, because there are those people that play Star Wars games. They're like, yeah, I'm a Jedi, and they're like, I want to like have a lightsaber with a blue blade and a red blade, and I like that it can spin around and make me fly. And there are those people out there that want to play Star Wars like that, and that is totally fine.
Yeah.
But it's the social contract.
I'm not sure.
It depends.
Yeah.
It depends. There it is.
Yeah.
It depends. The podcast words.
I think you could probably do a fun sort of Padawan game, but like, then it's a question of like mechanically, how do you stop them being so powerful? You say you can have one dice if we're playing Hyperspace. You can have one dice and one force thing or whatever. Like, maybe something like that. But even that's a lot, you know. Like when it's the force, like it doesn't have to be a lot for you to succeed. So yeah, I don't know.
I've been thinking I want to run a Jedi game. Like I love the idea of it. I think it would be something cool to think of in the future because I love it. Let's see. Kerry McMillan says, "What inspires you most about Vikings? What took most effort, time working on Iskloft? What did you enjoy most about the project, and what didn't you like so much?"
What inspires me the most about Vikings? I think it's a lot of things. I live in Dublin, which is Viking City.
Yes.
And like so much of our language and our history, considering how short a time it was that Vikings were the dominant sort of culture, it's still a huge part of like our culture and our language. Most of the words you have for little things, like in like peasant words, come from Norse, and most of the posh ones come from French or like Norman, you know, and like stuff like that is really interesting to me. I think the history is fascinating, and also I think like the culture is very interesting because it's this weird sort of very toxic idea of what masculinity is, like really like you have to die fighting someone, you know. It's like so fucking insanely metal in like a really like mad way. I think like you only get to go to the good place if you like are killing people and then you die, you know, or you're giving birth. And so like a lot of that stuff is fascinating to me because it creates this like culture of people who like, and there's like stuff like you don't lie, and there are certain like parts of Viking culture that I think are great and make for really interesting games. Like some of my favorite, maybe my old favorite thing about Iskloft at all is the shit sling that you get when you parlay with someone, you know. And there are really really strict like cultural laws about that, where if you come with like the certain kind of branch or whatever, then you have to give them that right. And so then often it's just they do that so they can come up and be like, see, you're a prick and I'm going to kill you. And like that's it. But it's such a cultural norm that like even if you hate these people, that you'll still stop and talk to them for a little bit before the fight, you know. And I love that.
I think, well, also, I mean, these were people whose cultures like developed and were integrated on them being seafaring and moving around and taking, like, they are the adventure warrior race. They are the adventurer race, the Vikings.
Big time.
Their whole deal was to go off on adventures and seek new lands and find new treasure. They are the role-playing game ideal so it's like they're built for it. And that isn't a diminishing of them at all. Like I think it's an excellent quality that obviously it wasn't. It was really terrible. But in terms of storytelling,
and I think that's interesting to me too. Is that like we kind of weirdly look at them with this sort of like, aren't Vikings cool?
Yeah, it's admirable, of course. Yeah,
but like awful, you know,
just awful, just like, the worst.
Just like so much killing and rape and plunder and like awful people, you know,
just the worst.
But we're just like, yeah, fuck yeah. And it's really weird, I think, as a culture that like we still think that they were cool, and like I think they're cool, but
we do like, anyway. Like we, like even it doesn't matter, does it? Like I mean, people rail. Right, okay, this is an example. Like people rail against the recent Joker movie that came out or whatever, and they say it glorifies sort of like violence and like solo shooters, that kind of thing. But then people at the same time watch a film like John Wick and don't bat an eyelid, and he murders thousands of people, like literally thousands of people. He like murders them, and no one's like, oh yeah, whatever, you know.
Maybe it's a tone thing.
It has to be a tone thing, and I think that's what Iskloft does really well, because while it does include those things. It never glorifies it like in a.
That's what is really important to me, is that like it's as much as you're playing these people, you're also exploring it, like those ideas, like when you're like raiding a place. So like you have to do that. And if you're playing the game and you're like, okay, we're gonna raid the village, what do we get? Like, no, that's not how it works. You have to tell me what you do, because if you want to like do the raiding thing, you have to tell me what you're doing, or else you're not doing it and you're not facing it and like thinking about it, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's like part of it for me.
It's very important, and yes, it's always anytime anything like that has happened in Iskloft, it just feels like shit.
Yeah.
So I think that's how it should be. Like it's absolutely how it should be, and it's well handled. Kerry Macmillan isn't finished. He also asks, how does Hyperspace D6 system compare to Fantasy Flight Edge of the Empire or D20 Star Wars?
Okay. I
I
didn't actually answer the rest of his questions.
Did we not?
No. So you asked about,
what did you enjoy most? Oh yeah, sorry. What did you enjoy most about the project? Pardon me.
Don't know. So what took the most time? That's formatting for sure. Formatting the monster section.
Oh my god, yeah.
Is a nightmare. Like a real nightmare. I still have fucking dreams of like moving things 1 pixel at a time to get them correct. That was hell. I really enjoyed writing stuff. I loved the adventure. Was like the most fun that I had writing in terms of writing. Actually, the best part of the project was getting art. That's like the coolest. Like, there's nothing that compares to I have an idea and then I tell someone and they fucking summon it from the ether onto some paper, and then it exists. You know, like that's the coolest thing.
And it's not just any art either.
No.
It's the art that's in that book, and that isn't me blowing smoke. That is just a fact. Like if you look at that art, it's just like, like mind-blowing stuff. Absolutely mind-blowing, and so on point, and so like there's a what's the word? There's a continuity to all of the art in the book, which I think is really important. Because like when you used to get like the old 3.5 books and you'd have like this beautiful illustration, it looks like it's like a beautiful painting that would be handed like in an art gallery. Mm-hmm. And then you turn the page and there's like a single inked like line of like a naga.
Yeah. Like
and it looks like it's
sketch or something.
Yeah, it's like it's been drawn on the back of a school book or something, you know. It's so I think that's really important. Was there anything else? I'm sure there's loads.
Yeah. Just wanted to not skip anything, and then
no, of course.
How did those?
What does he say?
Compare the Star Wars systems? I love. We were talking about this earlier. Like I love the Fantasy Flight Star Wars game. I don't like it for Jedi at all, but I think for sort of if you're doing like a Firefly-esque game, it's fucking great because it has like some crunchy mechanics for being a mechanic or being a hacker or and so rather than I roll a hacking check, there's rules for that stuff if you want to get into it. And like if I was playing a character, I would want to get into it, you know. And so like having subsystems for things like hacking and having like building droids and fixing weapons and modifying weapons, all that stuff, like to me is very satisfying because I do quite like a bit of crunch every now and then. But you need players who also want that, I think. Otherwise I would just play Hyperspace all the time, I think.
That's the thing, like, and this is on me, this isn't against Fantasy Flight at all, because I know plenty of people who were able to play that game and not have a problem with it. For me, I found it really difficult to learn to read what the dice were, and I knew some of them but not all of them. But that isn't against the system, that's on me for being lazy and not learning it. What I really like that Matt did with Hyperspace is that he has taken the element of the exploding die and put it in there. Every time you roll, and you should, if you haven't already, you really should go. I think Matt linked it recently in the Absolute Tabletop group, but you should go and look at it. When you, I'll just say very briefly, when you roll a pool of die, you also have a Destiny die in there, which is a different color die. It represents, something out of the ordinary happening. If you roll a 1, then it's something bad happens. So you might get wonderful rolls, but then your Destiny die rolls a 1, something bad is also going to happen. Or if you roll a 6, something good is going to happen. But you can take that 6 with this system and then roll it again. So you can just choose to add that to your existing pool, which I think is a really nice thing. Like it gives people who more are wanting more numbers to have more numbers with the chance of being able to get, a higher result. Or you can, if you're a more sort of like environmental kind of person, you're thinking about what's going on in the scenario, whatever, you can then use that to sort of, within reason, add to the scenario for your benefit, like using your lightsaber to knock a stray blaster bolt into a door control so it shuts. That's what happened in that game, for example. So there's things in there as well that the hyperspace takes from sort of like the exploding die thing of Fantasy Flight, but obviously a simplified version.
I think like Fantasy Flight does some, like, I think that the narrative die system is great because, like, similarly, you never just roll and it's success or fail. It's never binary. So you always, like, sometimes that can be exhausting because sometimes you get a roll which is like catastrophic failure, enormous advantage, and like you're like, I just really know how this, you know. But when I run it, that's always like a table decision. We like talk about it together. And,
that's the thing, yeah. It's really nice to just talk about it as well, which again is very key on the players that you have with you, I think, as well. Which is always the case in everything, I understand, but you know. And as for D20, well, it's basically just Dungeons and Dragons 3.5, but with Star Wars. And if you're a Force user, you know it, and if you're not a Force user, you definitely know it. So, but I still love it. I have very fond memories. I ran 3 Old Republic sagas back in the 3.5 days of Star Wars, and I have fond memories of them. So it is a system that can accommodate for your big sweeping epic Star Wars stories. But I think if and when I run another Star Wars game, it's going to be using the Hyperspace D6 just for the accessibility, and the just how slick it is. Really, it's really nice. Really nice.
I think for me, like, for a Jedi game, I will only use Hyperspace. I think I'm currently running a Fantasy Flight game, and like, I like it. I think if I was starting it now, I might use Hyperspace instead because it's just easier to run. I think because Fantasy Flight is quite crunchy, and it does require a lot of like specific knowledge about the games in a way that like all those subsystems, which are great, also means more specific rules that you have to know. You know, which
agreed.
It's a trade-off if you like.
And don't get me wrong, I loved playing the Hyperspace. The Fantasy Flight games. I've only played it twice, and both of them run by you, Lloyd. And obviously, Lloyd knows what those dice mean. Yeah. Now, that isn't fair. That isn't fair by any stretch to make Lloyd be the one to tell me what I've rolled. Yeah. But regardless, I was enjoying being a Mandalorian fighting Jedi, and I was enjoying doing a heist on a crime syndicate ship. Like it just facilitates it wonderfully, sort of Edge of the Empire style. So yeah.
The other thing that it has, which I will just mention, is that they have this obligation system, and that's fucking great. Like for campaigns,
that is very cool. Yes, you're right.
When you're making a character, like you start with a bunch of debt or something. You know, not always a debt, but you're starting with some sort of character debt. Sometimes it's literally you owe people money, but sometimes it's like you're wanted on X planets or blah blah blah. And so you start with all this stuff for your character, and then at the start of the session the GM rolls a dice and determines like which of these things will come up in some way during the game. So maybe like this session it's you and your debt to the Black Sun will come up, and you know, when a time is inconvenient, some Black Sun thugs will be like, hey, don't I know you from somewhere? You know,
don't I know you from somewhere? Exactly.
And that sort of stuff is great, I think, you know.
The one last thing I want to give a shout out about it is there's an excellent set of lightsaber duel rules in there as well, which was co-created with Barker, who's also in that game. And those rules are excellent. To explain very, very briefly, I don't want to explain the circumstances of the duel because it was just cool. I think you should go watch it. But essentially, it's basically just opposed roles of you saying what you want to do. And whoever wins the opposed roll wins, a duel die. And you basically accrue as many duel die as possible until you're at the point where you think you can pull it out of the bag and win. And I think that is very cool. It's very tense because, you realize that while you've succeeded, they've succeeded on the next round. It does feel like the back and forth of a lightsaber duel. And with your successes and with your failures, different elements will come into the fight. You will move. Obviously, lightsaber duels rarely happen in one location. They move from place to place, which is obviously very fitting. Just an excellent set of lightsaber rules, duel rules, which I thought were very cool and very dramatic, having been on the receiving end of one now. So, sorry, I put the Facebook down again. Let's see. The next question is
Kai's
it Kai's Corner?
It is indeed.
Kai's Corner. Kai says, oh man, how many questions are there? Right, okay.
It's really a think piece more than anything.
Oh my goodness, right. Okay, here we go. Shouldn't PCs that are brutally wounded retire from the game? Would a warrior band want to rely on someone who could use an arm or leg? Would an injured comrade want to imperil their comrades by tagging along with them? In Iskloft, a harsh and unforgiving land, can a warband afford to carry the weak? Or isn't a critical hit in Iskloft the end of the PC of whether or not it actually kills them? So we'll stop there for a second. Well, it's very fitting considering the app that is in development at the moment. I think it's crucial, first of all, for that threat to be there.
It's a good question, one that I've wondered, like if you're there's modifiable rules in the book in terms of like if you don't want your like including those rules in your game means that it's very likely that a player will within a few sessions suffer a critical hit that might permanently wound them or could die. Like it's possible in every combat that a critical hit could kill you.
Yep.
And so there are ways to modify that, like in terms of like, okay, well, you have to confirm it, or you only roll 1d10 on the table, or like a bunch of different ways that you can mitigate it. But if you're playing as designed, then you're not doing that, and every time you get a critical hit, you get a critical wound, like a brutal wound. And so it's entirely possible that you will be out of the game. And I think like he's right in that like you can't afford to look after someone who can't look after themselves in a world where it's every man for themselves in many ways, you know? And so I think the answer is like, no, they won't look after you, and you'll have to like retire in ignoble circumstances, you know?
Yep. And from a player perspective as well, this is something that is obviously agreed upon before you start playing. And I mean, if you know what Iskloft is, and a lot of people watching already know that if you're signing up for an Iskloft game, then invariably that does mean that if you get brutally injured, you will face the repercussions of that. It's like me deciding to play Dark Souls and then suddenly getting very annoyed. I've been on the same level for 4 hours because it's too hard. Well, yeah, because that's the experience that I've signed up to. Like, I know that that's going to be a difficult game, and that's the enjoyment that I get out of it. I enjoy playing high risk, sometimes low reward games like Iskloft. Not low reward, I mean like in character, obviously not as a player. Things like that because of that, just simply because of that. Like every fight could be your last. And I love the idea that characters have been literally put out of action just because I say just because, like making it's like a small thing, it isn't. But if you lose an arm or something, you know, there is no heroic Luke Skywalker getting a new hand, you know. There's nothing like that. There's no wizardry or sorcery that's gonna give you a spell glove like Azarax in Lawkeepers or whatever. It's part of Iskloft, man.
Daniel just said in the chat, thank Odin for absorb rules, and that's like one of the things that reinforces really well that you always want to fight with a shield and a helmet.
Absolutely. You know? I think that was
like
that was genius when you first told me that. I was like, that's incredible. Of course. Because
you often see, and it does my fucking head in, like you see people on TV and they're fighting with armor and no helmet, you know?
Yeah.
And no shield. And I'm like, for me, I would take my shield before I put on armor, you know, if I was going to go fight.
Number one is a shield if you're in a real fight, absolutely.
And so, like, it's just so baffling to me that, like, you know, sometimes the best choice to fight with, mechanically the best choice might be to fight with, like, one big weapon, and, like, in D&D, normal D&D, like, a greatsword is incredible if you're, you know, you want to do damage. But also, like, you can't block a person with a greatsword. It's too big. You know, like, and, like, maybe that's too granular for, like, most people, but this is a way for me to be like, okay, look, you can fight however you want, but if you want to live, you should be bringing a shield and a helmet to the fight every time, you know?
It's what you were saying before, like what you get out of low magic or no magic settings is the fact that it's you're in reality. You're in reality, and if like you say, if you are carrying like a massive metal greatsword that is heavy, almost as heavy as like the top half of you.
Yes.
Like, and you're trying to swing it around and like block it like it's a lightsaber, then it's not going to happen.
It's not happening.
So you're buying into reality with Iskloft one way or the other.
So like, you can mitigate it that way too. Like if when I'm playing Iskloft, I always make sure before a fight that I've got my shield and my helmet.
Get your shield. Yeah.
And then one time I didn't have my shield. I was playing a berserker and I threw my shield away so I could, I don't know, cave someone's skull in with my face or something. And then I got hit and crit and lost half my face, and immediately. And I was like, well, that's what I get for putting my shield away.
That's what you get. That is exactly what you get.
Yep.
Yeah. I like the also, it does, if you want to look at it this way, it is like real life in the sense that if someone then throws their shield away and is then able to win the fight, it then reinforces how badass you have to be to do that.
Yeah.
So that's a quite cool way to look at it. Like in Game of Thrones, the TV show, they rarely ever use shields. And admittedly, it is to look flash, but also there is that influence of the Age of Heroes where the guy decides to fight the mountain with a spear, for example. There are little bits of that sort of creep in that you're like, okay, cool. You have to just be a fucking badass to not use one, essentially. So, shields, there we are. That's one thing that we've learned.
Yes.
Caius continues. Do you want to continue, Lloyd?
What I'm asking is not about the short-term combat flavour that brutal injuries give, which is great, but about their long-term effect on campaigns. Nar Iron Fist broke his leg and was carried around most of Middle-earth. Wounded Austin spent one session in grumbling in bed and missed the next before he could return to action. Should a PC that takes a wound that will incapacitate them for 4 weeks miss the next sessions until the PC is fit to play, or do you want to play through the convalescences?
That raises a very good point, because us carrying Nar around was... No, I was going to say it wasn't fun. It was fun. Yeah. It was really fun, actually. I think... I like, because it gave us that encounter on the mountain, all right?
Yeah.
That encounter on the mountain where Nar had a messed up leg, and it wasn't a fight. For those of you who don't know, Lloyd ran a game called Against the Shadow, which I hope we will go back to one day, where we were having to cross the Misty Mountains, and obviously anyone who's a Tolkien fan knows you can't cross the Misty Mountains lightly, and that is absolutely what happened. A horse, Dan's character's, his horse, the Rohirrim, his horse was beginning to slip off the edge, and Nar had like a busted leg. So he's trying to hold on to this horse whilst his leg is like hampering him. I thought that was excellent.
Yep.
But also...
And he made that sacrifice to like have his leg break to save the horse, And
he broke again, didn't it? Yes, it broke again.
Yep, because it was injured, and then he made the choice. I was like, you can save the horse, but it will break your leg. And he was like, yep, I'll do it. And that's incredibly Lord of the Rings, and felt so correct, And yeah, I mean, I think it adds more to a game than it takes away, I think. It adds a real hesitancy to get into scary fights, which I think is important in the kind of game that uses brutal wounds. So... it's just strife. It's like it's trouble and strife. It's drama, isn't it? If you've got someone who's injured, that happens all the time in war, and we constantly fight in war. In these games, like there's always war and there's always fights. And it adds to this idea that, like, a veteran in Iskloft, someone who's played or fought for a decade, will not look like Ragnar from Vikings. He will be battered into bits, and he'll be missing fingers and broken teeth, and and that's like, if you spend your whole life fighting people with edged weapons in close combat, like, you will not get away lightly, Also lends wisdom to the characters who are veterans in those games, because they know what it's like, and they're like, just don't, because otherwise you'll end up like me. I've got post-traumatic stress. Like, it's just the worst. Like, you very would have something like that. So it's. But anyway, what else did Caius say? So, totally unrelated. How do you feel about the blend of sci-fi and fantasy? Do you like fantasy world with crashed spaceships, and do you like sci-fi with hooky old wizards lingering out of the way planets? Star Wars. so yeah. I think Krask is kind of a blend of fantasy. That's so funny, because I literally was just talking about that there was a crashed spaceship. And this was before we started talking. Prescient by Caius. I think it's fine. I think it depends. So do I. It obviously depends on everything. It depends. I like the weird intersection of... Because to me, things from other planes are aliens, So... Like, the Gith are aliens, Mind Flayers are aliens, as much as they are anything else. And so, like, I think that's fine, and it makes for weird, interesting stuff. It gives another place. It's another plane of existence, isn't it? Yeah. And I'm not
a huge Star Trek fan, big fan of TNG. I always enjoyed it when they would visit planets that hadn't advanced as much as other planets. And I think that is just the way of things. I think if there are others, like we're going to go proper tinfoil hat now, Lloyd, but if there are in existence other civilizations in our universe, which I personally believe there must be at some point, you know, they'll be at a different place. They may be far more advanced. They may be completely behind. So, and I never remember the quote. It's a quote that I always have to use, but never remember it. But one man's magic is another man's technology. Technology indistinguishable from magic. That's it.
Arthur C. Clarke, I think, is it?
That's the one. Yeah, Clark. That's right. So yeah, I think it's really interesting. I have a dimension. I have a setting that I've never ever used, but I've always wanted to run a game called The Last Dimension, which is all the D&D races fleeing through the multiverse to the last dimension, which is what the game's name is, and the last dimension is like the last bastion of existence, and so basically it's all sort of mishmash of things just come from all the different places who now have to like cooperate in this one plane of reality, which would be fun to play a game at some point. But yeah, so in short, yeah, I really do like that kind of idea of different technologies blending.
Taylor has a question. What's a game you'd want to play in but wouldn't want to GM? Shadowrun.
Oh, you beat me to it. I've got two, actually. Explain why Shadowrun, first of all.
I think Shadowrun's like one of the coolest settings that exists.
Yeah.
It has the worst rule set that I've ever seen.
Terrible.
And so... and it's not bad...
No, I'm just kidding. I just don't know them. Again, yes. I don't know them.
So it's not actually bad to play, but it's incredibly complex and specific. And so I don't want to learn all those rules to run it, you know? I would learn enough rules to play it, but I don't want to learn enough rules to run it. And
I agree. I absolutely 100% agree with you. I've got one that I think might interest you, and it's something that I had to come to terms with a long time because I think it's a very fucking cool setting, but I know for a fact that I probably will never, ever be able to run anything 40k.
Oh, yeah.
Because I love 40k, but I just don't know enough of it. And with 40k, I think it's like Vampire in a lot of ways. Like you, like sticking to the lore and sticking to like all the little bits and pieces is what makes playing those games fun.
Yes.
So I've played,
That's actually a game that I would love to play in, but don't want to GM because every time I've tried to GM it, I play. No one else knows it, really.
That's the one point.
And so when I'm running it, everyone's just like, "Huh? What? Can I be a space marine?" Like, no, you can't be a space marine.
That's basically me. I'm like, I'm a space marine. I want to fight an orc or a Tyraniid. Come on, let's go.
Yeah, that is not my because I'm really into it, and it's like my secret fandom. Like, I love it. I've read dozens of novels. Like, fucking love it. You know. But it's so specific, and the lore is so labyrinthine.
It is, yeah.
You just can't have a sort of like dip-in game into 40k, I don't think, because it like.
And I've tried. Like I've been like ever since I was young. I've been like bits and pieces collecting Space Marines. I have I have about 4,000 points of Black Templars, but I still fucking don't have like a clue how to get into this world.
Yeah.
I played it
with a new rule set recently, and it looks really good. Maybe that's what I'll run. A little trilogy or something.
But the thing is, I have played in a 40k game. And it was they released a bunch of them, and they were for specific things. There was Inquisition. There was one Fantasy for playing
them. So Dark Heresy and Only War and Black Crusade and
Only War. That was it. I played a game of Only War, and that was incredible.
That's where the guardsman.
We played Guardsman. My friend Kyrie ran it, and she basically made us these guardsmen from a recently colonialized Imperial world. So when the Imperium arrived or whatever, we were a sort of like a World War II kind of stage in life, and then basically picked up by the Imperium. Given the Imperial Guard handbook, which we were given, which is hilarious because it makes out the orcs, they may appear to be like bulging and muscled, but really they're very easy to kill.
The
like
Imperial Guardsman's uplifting primer, I think it's called.
That's it, and it's just complete propaganda. And these people that have never been involved in a 40k war get dropped into a 40k war, a tank division, and our tank gets dropped out of basically the ship got attacked and we fell into the warp, whatever, and we ended up on this planet. And it was us alone in this tank against like a planet filled with orcs, and it was incredible. Like we had to like get to different outposts and things like that. It was a survival game essentially. But that's what I mean. Like because I was like this person that didn't know anything about these creatures whatsoever, it totally worked.
Yeah.
So there's always a game. There's always a game to get someone in there.
See, for me, the stuff I would like to do would be like an Inquisition game, because I think that's like one of the coolest things about it.
See, I would be interested in that.
That requires so much knowledge of the setting for you to be an Inquisitor. Like, requires so much understanding of what's okay and what's not, and that sort of stuff. And like, yeah, it just takes a lot. So I'd love to play as an Inquisitor, but I don't want to run that game because I'd have to spend 90% of the time explaining, well, a Space Marine is, and like have to go through all of the fucking 20,000 year history of like,
See, even now I don't remember, but what they were called. But I remember the sort of even the dynamic of the group was really good. We had a psyker, that's right, isn't it? A psyker.
Yeah.
We had a psyker who then had his accompanying guardsman, who's basically his only job is to shoot the guy if he goes nuts. Yeah. But there was two people in our party that were that. There was the psyker and the handler, or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
I just thought that's just such an interesting dynamic. You've got a wizard that basically has like an on the payroll guy to shoot him if he goes nuts.
Because the psychic powers are so powerful in Warhammer. They're so incredibly like they're more powerful than magic in D&D, and like they open up this like portal to other.
Yeah, they bring like archdemons out just like that if you roll a certain number. Holy shit!
And so you just have dudes whose job it is to make sure that if they start talking weird, they just like take care of them, because it's like so dangerous.
Oh my goodness me!
Yeah, it's great. I'm gonna maybe run something of that. I love it. I think it's such a good setting.
Tickled the old 40k thing there.
Thank you.
Now
Tyler.
that appears to be the end of the Facebook questions. Is there any left in the chat for us to contest with?
One more question from Caius, which is
excellent.
Does G.R.R. Martin explain why Westeros castles take so long to build? Richard I built the vast Chateau Gaillard. I don't speak French. In 2 years, and Edward I's Welsh castles were finished in a decade. I think.
Well, they're so much bigger, aren't they?
They're gigantic. Yeah, I think like Storm's Reach, the walls are like hundreds of feet high, and like Storm's End, and like some of the castles are sort of old and magic. The Eyrie as well, or the Eyrie, like if you've seen it, like people can't build castles like that, and dragons and stuff. So I think it's like those castles are sort of ancient and magic, and I think it's not really easy to like build things like that anymore, and you couldn't do it in the amount of time that you need,
As Bronn says, give me 10 good men or whatever. I guess it's just because of the size, I suppose, but it's always expanding, isn't it? I think the reason being is because like King's Landing, from what I got from Fire and Blood, which is a great read, like you find out that it got like building the Red Keep got stalled for a little bit, and some people disagreed that they should be building it, and then they carried on building it, and then after a while they thought, no, actually we should build more onto this, and then like the older parts of the castle disappear between the walls, so there are all these secret passages and things like that. I think it's more for a storytelling thing than a practical timescale of what it would take to build such a thing. I'm curious how long it would have taken, because like the pyramids are absolutely gigantic. I imagine there must be some estimate of how long they took to build, but those are huge building blocks.
Right. But it's easier if you have 20,000 slaves,
hundreds and thousands of slaves. Oh my god!
I guess you kind of have in the Middle Ages, but not literally.
Not to the same degree by any stretch of the imagination. No way.
Right, I think that's it.
It seems so, doesn't it? Ewan Pontley says, the Emperor protects.
Yes, he does.
So I think that's a good little message to go out on. Well, in that case, it leaves us only to say thank you ever so much for watching the Dyers cast.
I guess you kind of
Lloyd, anything to plug, anything to spin before we
spin?
Go on, spin.
No, nothing. I guess keep your eyes out for a link to buy Iskloft next week sometime. This week sometime.
Yeah.
If you want it.
Which you should, because as we've just discussed, it's an excellent experience, and I think even if you're new people would obviously really enjoy the thrill of the very dangerous combat that is involved.
I think so.
And everyone loves Vikings, as we discussed, right?
Yeah.
The John Wick thing. No one gives a fuck. Die 100 people can die, and it's fine.
Cool.
Yeah, cool. For me, there's got a few things coming up as I was discussing with Lloyd, but I'll talk about that another time. For the meantime, definitely go and check out the D6 Hyperspace D6 hack that Matt Clicker's produced, because I think it's excellent if you want to run Star Wars. And look out for more episodes of the Dyers cast in the future. Thank you very much. Lloyd, are you ready to end the stream whilst I continue to fill air?
Yes. I'm going to press the button.
Press the button.